Hello and welcome to an unusual episode of the history of Bangalore, when I take you to the United States to tell you about how Hyder Ali entered the consciousness of the American Revolution as a war hero. I am Ramjee Chandran and this is episode 92. It's part 3 of my Hyder Ali series. In September 1780, Hyder Ali had routed in the Second Anglo-Mysore Wars the British Army at a place called Pollilur, presently in Tamil Nadu. Now, I will cover that battle in detail in a later episode, but today I'm jumping forward with the story of what America did with one of the most remarkable chapters of Hyder's life. It's an important but hidden part of the global history of Bangalore. But before I do that, first, my thanks to my sponsors, the Prestige Group, for their support. Building cities one landmark at a time, they transform dreams into reality. You can be a part of the future. Simply add prestige to your life. On the 19th of October 1781, at the Battle of Yorktown, General Cornwallis of the British Army surrendered to the American General George Washington. This was a pivotal battle and a decisive victory. 9 days later, on the 28th of October 1781, the town of Trenton, New Jersey, held a dinner to celebrate this famous victory. The American Revolutionary War was, for all practical purposes, won. Later that evening, the governor of New Jersey and all the important people of the region dined in celebration of the defeat of Cornwallis. As is customary, toasts were raised. At this dinner, 13 toasts were raised, presumably one for each of the original American colonies. The first 4 toasts went to the United States Congress, third went to the King of France, and the fourth to General George Washington, and the remaining 9 after that honored various American people and places. But toast number 11 was unusual, if not completely out of place, and it was raised to a man who had never set foot in America, who lived thousands of miles away, who had no formal alliance with the American cause, and had never communicated with Washington or any of the members of the US Congress, or indeed, as we know, with anyone else in America. As is customary, everyone at the dinner stands up, glass in hand, and one of them makes a toast, and it went. The great and heroic Hyder Ali, raised up by Providence to avenge the numberless cruelties perpetrated by the English on his unoffending countrymen, and to check the insolence and reduce the power of Britain in the East Indies. And at this point, by convention, everyone would have raised their glass in the air and chorused, Hyder Ali. To understand why a room full of American revolutionaries, freedom fighters, raised a glass to the Dalawai of Mysore, we need to understand the logic of the moment. The American War and the Wars of Mysore were not exactly separate conflicts happening in isolation from each other. They were 2 theaters of the same global confrontation. Stay with me while I unravel that ball of wool. Britain was fighting to preserve its empire and to expand it on both fronts simultaneously, India and the United States. And Hyder had inflicted on the British one of the most complete military defeats in its history. The British had never been defeated in India before. That defeat at Pollilur in September 1780 sent a message. The British were not invincible. They could be routed by an Indian army under an Indian commander, fighting by Indian methods adapted by Western technology. The Americans understood exactly what that meant. The name Hyder Ali, the fame of that man, had been circulating in American newspapers and pamphlets for several years before that Trenton dinner. He was not an obscure figure. His name started to come out to America ever since he started defying the British. The wars of Mysore were reported in the American press with genuine interest, partly because anything that weakened the British was of strategic value to the colonies, and partly because Hyder's resistance seemed to echo with their own. Add to this the fact that France was involved in the American War of Independence and were more and more getting involved with the state of Mysore. And one man that drew that connection was a man called Philip Freneau. He was a poet and a journalist, and he was a close friend of Thomas Jefferson and one of the most widely read voices of the American Revolution. Freneau was commissioned to write a recruitment poem for a Pennsylvania warship. You see, the state had purchased a small sloop, which is a 100-ton merchant vessel, and they converted it into a fighting vessel. And that is done by fortifying the sides of the ship and placing cannons on the deck. Commanding that vessel was a young American called Joshua Barney. And that vessel was given a name that tells you everything about the American mood of the time, because they christened it Hyder Ali. Joshua Barney was the figurehead that attracted a lot of people because of his youth, and Freneau's recruitment poem was printed, distributed, and it was sung in the taverns of Philadelphia to attract young men to serve aboard her. And it ran to 15 verses, and I can't help but want to repeat some of those verses. Come all ye lads who know no fear, to wealth and honor with me steer in the Hyder Ali privateer, commanded by brave Barney. With hand and heart united all, prepare to conquer or to fall. Attend my lads to honor's call, embark in our Hyder Ali. From an eastern prince she takes her name, who, smit with freedom's sacred flame, usurping Britain's brought to shame, his country's wrongs avenging. And that's quite the story. That refrain called men to embark in our Hyder Ali. That poem treated Hyder Ali not as some foreign ruler in a distant conflict, which he was, but as a fellow combatant in a universal struggle against British imperial overreach. The language is deliberate. Freedom's sacred fire, his country's wrongs avenging. These were the same phrases that Americans used to describe their own cause. The Hyder Ali was placed under the command of Lieutenant Joshua Barney, who was a Baltimore native who had already distinguished himself in the Continental Navy. Barney had 14 days from his appointment to recruit a crew of over 100 men, refit the vessel, and put out to sea. Whether it was because of this poem or not, he managed it. On the 8th of April 1782, the Hyder Ali was escorting a convoy of merchant ships through Delaware Bay when 3 British vessels appeared. Barney ordered the convoy to retreat and turn the ships to face the pursuit alone. What followed was a 26-minute engagement against a larger, better-armed British warship, the General Monk, and that became one of the most celebrated victories of the entire American Revolutionary War. Barney defeated the General Monk through a ruse that has since passed into American naval legend. He shouted a false order to the helmsman loudly enough for the British captain to hear, and then went ahead and did exactly the opposite of that command. The General Monk turned the wrong way after hearing it. The jib boom tangled in the Hyder Ali's rigging, and the Americans closed in with musket fire from the top. 26 minutes after the engagement began, the British ship struck her colors. The Hyder Ali had prevailed. The Pennsylvania legislature passed a resolution praising Captain Joshua Barney and the crew of the Hyder Ali, and the governor of Pennsylvania presented Barney with a gold-hilted presentation sword commemorating the victory. Freneau wrote a second poem about the battle, and this time it was set to music, and it is said to have become a popular folk song, said to have become because the tune, unfortunately, has since been lost. Many years later, James Fenimore Cooper called it one of the most brilliant actions ever fought under the American flag, a flag that flew on the ship, the Hyder Ali. And now for a commercial break, and when I return, more about this amazing story, coming up right after this.
Maximum connectivity, maximum luxury, maximum lifestyle. Live your max at Prestige Raintree Park. Opulent residences nestled in 21 acres of breathtaking landscape with 1 lakh plus square feet of clubhouse, 3 swimming pools, and ample leisure and sports amenities. Experience exquisite living at Prestige Raintree Park in prime Whitefield with schools, offices, hospitals, and shopping malls just a hop away. Call 81399 81399 or visit prestigeconstructions.com to know more. Radar approved.
The Hyder Ali was not the only ship to carry the name Hyder Ali. Records from the early 1800s document at least one more American ship named Hyder Ali built in Portland, in Maine, and this was a privateer that operated in the Indian Ocean around the Cape of Good Hope in the run-up to the War of 1812. The name Hyder Ali obviously meant something to the American public, and then Hyder Ali's presence in the American consciousness extended beyond ships, it extended beyond war, and it went right into the heart of American culture. In 1793, a court in the state of North Carolina heard a case. This was Williams versus Cabarrus. The dispute was over a wager on a horse race. One of the horses in that race was named, what else? Hyder Ali. Race horses in any era, anywhere in the world, are normally named for qualities that their owners admire: speed, power, courage, endurance, the capacity to defeat larger opponents. The fact that an American racehorse carried the name of the Dalai of Mysore tells you something about how deep the name Hyder Ali had penetrated into everyday American life. Thomas Jefferson, who, during all of this, was serving as an American minister to France, followed events in Mysore with very close interest. When Tipu Sultan sent his ambassadors to Paris in 1788, the delegation of 3 people dressed in Turco-Mysore finery caused the phenomenon that historians call Indomania. People came out on the streets of Paris to look at them. They loved their clothes. They imitated them, and French salons started to become inspired by these and created French designs based on what they saw these ambassadors wearing. Thomas Jefferson reported on it with genuine attention. American newspapers of the 1780s and the 1790s carried regular coverage of the Mysore Wars. Jedediah Morse's influential textbook, The American Universal Geography, which was published in 1793 and used in schools across the new republic, included sections on Mysore as a kingdom. Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan were, in a real sense, household names in the United States of America. None of this was accidental. The connection that Americans felt with Mysore was rooted in a specific and coherent strategic logic. Britain was stretched across 2 hemispheres. Remember, the sun never set on their empire. Every army it deployed in India was an army it could not deploy in America. Every rupee it spent fighting Hyder Ali was a dollar that it could not spend suppressing the colonies. The wars of Mysore had a material effect on Britain's capacity to fight in America, and informed and educated Americans understood that very well. Hyder Ali, on his part, had no particular interest in the American independence as a cause. He was fighting for his own, he was fighting for Mysore. But the conversions of enemies gave the 2 struggles a common resonance. Both were fighting the same empire. Both were fighting at the same time. And when Hyder Ali won, Americans noticed. And the other story that connects Bengaluru to America is the one I talked about in the previous episode, and this is the one about how the Mysore rockets invented by Hyder and Tipu had inspired a British artillery officer named William Congreve to use them as the basis for a new weapon system. And in case you haven't heard the previous episode, let me recap that briefly at this point, just because it's so relevant. The rocket was adopted by the British Army, and on the 14th of September 1814, it was used to bomb Fort McHenry in Baltimore in Maryland. A Washington lawyer turned poet named Francis Scott Key was watching from a truce ship in the Baltimore harbor, and as he watched through the night, they sent up their rockets, and by the red flare of the rockets, Francis Scott Key could see intermittently that no matter how much that fort was getting bombed, the American flag was still flying. And that poem that he wrote, called The Defense of Fort McHenry, became the lyrics for the American National Anthem, The Star-Spangled Banner. And in that national anthem is a phrase that every American child learns and knows by heart: the rocket's red glare. Those were nothing more than Mysore rockets adapted by William Congreve. Descended in a direct line of technological inheritance from the weapons made in this city, in Taramandalapete, in the factories of Hyder Ali's Bengaluru. The history of Bengaluru does not stay in Bengaluru. It never has. It travels along trade routes, along military supply chains, along the currents of global politics that have always moved through this plateau. A market town founded by a local chieftain in 1537, a military-industrial complex city built by an illiterate soldier from Kolar in the 1760s, and somewhere in that journey, in the iron casings of a rocket, in the name painted on the hull of a Pennsylvania warship, in the line of verse that became the anthem of a nation, Bengaluru left its mark on the world. In my next episode, I tell you how the British grew from being coastal traders to territorial conquerors and the impact that it had on Bengaluru, the long road to the gates of the Bengaluru fort built over more than a century of incremental calculated expansion. That's coming up next. I am Ramjee Chandran, and this is the history of Bangalore.